Episode 10 Hotel California. Greetings and welcome as always, dark wanderers and skeptics alike. You've surfed the web and arrived at my dark and sordid little tiny piece of the world. My name is Jessi and I'm here to share the tales of vast powers that we cannot comprehend. So sit back, put your feet up, and listen to today's entry. Oh, and one thing before we begin proper, I have been searching for that name from last week, Anton Scrivener. I've yet to find it anywhere else, something that's been a bit frustrating. If any of you, dear listeners, know the name or know of a saga within it, please let me know. So with that in mind, here's a listener submission sent to me a few days ago from username Arcane Tattletale. Hey there, I think I have something that you'll find useful. Anton Scrivener, which you mentioned last week, isn't the only one who's using these things for their own ends. There's a hotel owner deep in northern Ontario named Weatherby. Didn't get a first name. Let me start at the beginning. So my parents and I love to travel. We're from Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. Small town, but with a big claim. That sailing ship on our dimes, Blue Nose and Blue Nose 2. Famous ships, both built there. The town knows that, so despite the smaller size, there's tourist traps everywhere. Ship-themed restaurants, life-size statues of various ship characters, a captain, a navigator, the like. The people are nice and everything, but it gets a little heady. So we started traveling, largely as a way to take a break from the constant sales pushes and tourists stumbling around. It's not like we hate tourists or anything, we are tourists most of the year, but it's just that we'd rather be the one stumbling around with the map rather than watching someone else stumble around with the map. So a good 8 or so months of the year, we hop in our van and go for long road trips. My dad largely works from home and gets paid an absolute bucket load for, well, whatever it is he does. He's explained it to me 1,000 times, but all I hear is software, coding, security. Anyways, as long as he has internet, which we stay in hotels, so he does, he can work from pretty much, well, anywhere. We also have a satellite hookup, so if he needs to, my mom will drive and he'll type away on his laptop. That's how we were that day, driving across Ontario up towards Sault Ste. Marie. There are some little village-like areas there, and where there aren't any official towns or anything. I think technically most of them are zoned under Sault Ste. Marie itself, but all band together like little countryside villages. It's quite nice up there, actually. Still full of nature, nice rivers, and plentiful forests. Sometimes we like to go off the map a little, and we always had tents packed for that very reason. So we decided to just drive around till we found a nice, cozy little spot to camp a bit. We'd been driving well into the evening. The sun was mostly set on the horizon. We'd just turned down some little side road, more dirt path surrounded by forest than an actual road. We drove down it for what felt like a good hour before suddenly we were in a clearing with a small parking lot. At the end of it was a decent-sized little 2-story cottage-looking building. Think of an Airbnb, but sized up a bit, having access to probably 6 or 7 little suites. We all looked at each other confused, as the map had made no mention of a hotel or whatever this was on it. In fact, according to the map, the dirt road didn't exist either. We turned on the GPS, something we rarely did since it almost felt like cheating, and it was the same. According to both, this area should have just been dense forest. Thinking maybe it was just so new that neither map nor internet had been updated with its location, we parked and got out, taking only a small bag each, which had our toiletries and clothes for the next day. We didn't normally stay in places like this, Airbnb looking tiny, but there was something about it that just drew us in. So in we went. The door was nice and hand-carved, or so I figured. It had some standard filigree on it, but also a large tree carved in it, with 2 figures below it reaching up to an apple with a snake coiled around the pair. Great, I thought. Some religious hotel. I'm not anti-religion or anything, but I was pretty grumpy that day for private reasons, and I did not want to be patronized by whatever priestly person happened to run the joint. But I still followed my parents, for what else was I going to do, and we opened the door to a foyer. A large one that should have taken up the vast majority of the building, at least from what we'd seen on the outside, and yet we could see corridors heading away from us, far past where I'd thought the borders of the wooden outside went. It was odd, but we'd seen plenty of odd architecture in our times traveling, so we just kind of shrugged at each other and went across the mahogany carpet towards the empty front desk. There was no sign of computers, nor any technology really, save for the single elevator just off to the side. I remember that the walls were this weird off-white color that somehow gave the impression of brown, but when you focused on them, they were as white as snow. There was a single bell on the desk, so I rang it, my child's mind bored with this place already. The sound that came from that bell Have you ever been to like a really nice wedding and they tap on the glass for a toast? You know that sound that just rings out somehow everywhere as if there's no source to it? It was like that, a single sharp crystal note that seemed to be everywhere, but with no echo somehow. It faded rather quickly and we looked around hoping to see, well, anyone. The lobby was empty and there was no activity down the halls that we could see, so we just found ourselves waiting impatiently at the desk. I was just about to ring the bell a second time when a figure just appeared behind the counter. I remember thinking he must have been hiding behind it, like on his hands and knees or something, because he was tall, like really tall, probably about 7 feet tall. I remember looking up at him and for some reason getting a circus ringmaster kind of vibe off him. I don't know why. He was dressed in a red coat, but it had a name tag on it that said Weatherby, owner and proprietor on it. I remember stuttering on that word, proprietor. Welcome. How may I assist you? His voice was thin, like he was speaking through his nose, I think is how I would describe it. He had a giant smile on his face, and I couldn't see his eyes, but I somehow got the sense that they never met that grin. My parents blinked for a second before telling him that we were there to stay the night. He nodded knowingly and pulled out a big book, a ledger. He thumped it on the counter and opened it to a seemingly random page.
May I have your names for the room?
He asked. My parents said yes and proceeded to tell him our names. He nodded, recorded them with a large feather quill. Not sure where he got it from, but I swear it didn't exist before it was in his hand. Then he handed us a key. Not a key card, but an actual key. It looked like one of those old-timey ones that you'd see in the movies with a small tag on it that denoted our room number 201. We thanked him and asked when checkout was. He just smiled and pointed to a sign that was most definitely not there before. Check out anytime you like. We all nodded and headed to the elevator, more than a little off-put. There was nothing sinister happening, at least not that we saw, but the entire vibe of the place was starting to get to us. We went to the room and found it had 2 beds. It was only then that we'd realized we hadn't specified what type of room we wanted, so we silently thanked Weatherby for giving us a 2-bedroom and got ready for bed, taking turns in the bathroom. That night I had weird dreams, weird for a few reasons. Normally my dreams were pretty normal, mostly just memories replayed with skewed perspectives or stereotypical dreaming of school or work. But that night I dreamed of feasts. Long tables in a small meadow filled with various foods, turkeys and chickens and salads and desserts. Foods I had no idea what they were meant to be and drinks of every color. I didn't do anything in the dream, but it was more like I was watching the feasting. There was no one there save for my parents and Weatherby, who sat at the head of the table slowly carving one of the turkeys while staring at my parents. I just stood there unmoving for what felt like hours. Then the turkey was done being carved and the dream ended with Weatherby standing with a knife braced in one hand. Then I just dreamed of darkness with a light pink fog. I don't know how long that dream went on for, but when I awoke, both my parents were still asleep. There wasn't an outside-facing window in our room, something that I was a little confused at, since every other hotel I'd ever seen or stayed at had had windows. I snuck out of the room, thinking I'd look to see if this was one of those super early morning continental breakfast type of places. The corridor I left into was different from the one we'd entered in. So much so that I popped my head back into the room, thinking that maybe there was 2 doors and I'd somehow just not noticed. But there wasn't. Just the one plus the bathroom door. I yawned, thinking I was maybe misremembering from the previous night. So I closed the door, making sure to have the key with me, as well as double-checking that the numbers matched. I don't know why I did that, it just sticks in my memory. They did. I picked a random direction as the hall went both ways and started walking, looking for the elevator or some stairs. The hall wasn't the same off-white the lobby had been in. Instead, it was more yellow. I should be clear, it was still white, just like the lobby had been, but where the lobby had somehow seemed brown, this hall somehow seemed yellow. I was walking for a few moments before I realized I hadn't passed another door at all. No elevator, no door to the stairwell, no other hotel rooms. Our room hadn't been that big, there was no way it took up the entire floor. I turned around and couldn't see the room door anymore. Had I been walking that long? I started to jog lightly, not really scared, but just on the cusp. I had been lost before, just once when we were camping. I had gone to take a leak and couldn't find my way back. I was not really wanting to repeat that. My footfalls felt heavy on the dark carpet, and the more I moved without seeing the door, the more scared I actually became. By the end of it, I was sprinting full speed down the hall, passing by random hotel art paintings and occasional small end tables. The same painting, the same table. Hadn't I already passed that one? How many was that now? Was I even moving? Surely the building wasn't that large. I don't know how long I ran for, but eventually I couldn't breathe, so I sat down, struggling to catch my breath. Still no doors, no windows, no end to this hallway, with the same pictures and the same end tables. Once I could finally breathe again, I stood, slightly calmer, though not by much. I decided I'd see if this was real, if I was really passing the same picture and table over and over, or I was just imagining it. So I walked to the next picture and tilted it ever so slightly. The next table I put a small scratch in it with the key. Then I kept walking. I passed by the picture, but it was straight. The table, however, did have my scratch on it. Mixed results. My panic began to rise and I began to shout. I say began because my voice died as I realized something. See, at this point I was 16 and had been taken to calling my parents by their first names as a sort of teenage rebellion. They didn't care much, so I'd stuck with it. But as I went to call their names, I couldn't. I didn't remember them. I knew who they were my parents, but their names... gone. It was like I'd never known them. After another moment of panic, again, I don't know how long I was standing there with the world spinning around me. I eventually started calling out Mom, Dad, while walking along the direction that I hoped the room was in. That's when I felt it, something behind me. It was a weird moment, as on one hand I felt relief, finally contact with someone, hopefully my parents, but on the other hand, there was some part of me, some sense telling me not to turn around, but to run. To move as fast as I could away from whatever it was that was just beyond my peripheral vision. And I stood frozen for a second. You know how they say fight or flight? There's another option there when you get scared. Freeze. It's not really a voluntary choice. Your body just gets all sorts of signals from your brain all at once and can't decide what ones to follow, so you just freeze up. Now, that's what happened to me. I couldn't look behind me, but I couldn't move away. I couldn't call out for help. I couldn't confront whatever was causing my mind to go haywire. I don't know how long I stood there, sweat beading on my forehead, dripping down my face. I was trembling and I could hear the lightest of footsteps on the carpet. The cold metal of the key burned in my hand, but I couldn't let go. The steps got closer and closer, slowly, almost painfully slow. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood pounding in my ears. Closer, closer, closer. My breath came out in choking gasps, and there were spots in my vision from the reduced airflow. I thought for sure this is where I was going to die. 16 years old in some hotel in a forest in Ontario where no one would ever find me. I was going to die, and the last thing I'd see was the endlessly extending hallway before me of the strange, nameless hotel. Then a hand touched my shoulder gently, and I could breathe. I looked up to see Weatherby, who looked down at me, his smile not meeting those eyes. He was still wearing that red coat and somehow looked the exact same as he had the previous night, like as if he'd just disappeared from there and then and reappeared here and now.
Are you lost, miss?
He asked, and I just nodded. Words died in my throat and I felt hoarse, unable to speak. He nodded and asked for the key. I handed it to him without hesitation, as if it was the thing I was supposed to do. He looked at the number and tisked.
No wonder. You're on the 5th floor, miss. Here, let me guide you.
He walked forward a few paces and turned to the wall, which I swear was empty. Just wall. He'd only moved maybe 5 feet away. I would have seen the elevator if I'd been there. And yet, there it was. It opened without him touching the button, and he gestured in, half bowing as if he was some showman. I went in, hit my eyes wide, the panic still in my chest like a fist. He handed me the key, and I reached into the elevator and hit the 2 button. He nodded at me as the door closed, and in that split second, just before the door closed and broke our eye contact, I swear, his entire face changed, morphed into some approximation of what it had been. Like someone had made a mask of his face, but it was incomplete. His eyes were less bright, the smile was yellow tinged now, the red cheeks looked like painted circles, his red coat looked more circus-like. I staggered back, but the door was closed, leaving him on the 5th floor, taking me to the 2nd. I want to point out that I never left my floor. Never went up any stairs or any ramps, didn't see any elevators, let alone ride any. But the elevator counted down the floors and opened just in front of my room as they had the night before. I opened the door with the key just in time to see my parents making the bed. They looked at me, asked where I'd been. I stammered out something about looking for a breakfast but not finding it, and they just nodded. We grabbed our stuff and left, resolving to stop off at a McDonald's or something for breakfast. We took the elevator down and went to the front desk where Weatherby was already waiting, his face back to how it had been the night before. He asked how our stay was, and my parents told him it was fine, thank you. He nodded and pulled out the ledger, and that quill appeared in his hand again.
You'll probably want these back, I imagine.
He muttered, so low my parents didn't hear, and I barely heard it. Sometimes I think I imagined it. He crossed their names off, and suddenly I remembered them. Ariel and Josh, Mom and Dad. They didn't seem to notice. We gave the key back and asked the price, but Weatherby just shook his head.
The room has already been paid for, no payment necessary. Thank you for staying with us.
And then he was gone. I blinked and my parents just shrugged and looked at me. All right, Scooter, let's go. Scooter, they said. My nickname from when I was a kid, and all I did was ride my scooter around. I realized at that point I couldn't remember my name. My heart beat faster again. I looked back to see if I could see the ledger, the quill, something, to relearn my name, to get it back. Instead, I saw him. Weatherby standing there, that toothy yellow grin, the painted cheeks, the glassy eyes. His head tilted and he waved in a jerky motion, one that reminded me of a wooden puppet, a marionette. We left and I was all too happy to get the hell out of that place. We hopped in the car and I couldn't help but look back at that place. A small two-story cottage-looking building. No need for an elevator, no fifth floor. I know we checked out. I also know I never left. I'm still there. My name's still registered as a guest in that ledger. A hotel that defies physical space. A puppet proprietor. I must say, I don't think most of my mythological expertise here helps me comprehend this one. I find myself questioning much here, and not that I don't believe this scooter, I do. I simply don't follow what was happening. For example, an unlisted hotel in the middle of a dense forest. The perfect place to pull some type of otherworldly abductions or murders, I guess. But this Weatherby, puppet or person, just let them all leave? Say for Scooter, who seems to be certain that they're due back there. What happened with their ID cards? Or any other records of them? Do they still exist, or do they list Scooter now? And names itself. The power of a true name is a concept explored very heavily in pretty much every culture. Most agree that you have a secret, true name that simply no one knows, but should they ever learn it, they have some level of control or ownership of you. I find myself wondering if that is what this Weatherby was after, if they now have some level of ownership of Scooter. But why only them? Why not all of them, or the parents? Suppose we'll simply have to look into other sagas to find out. I must admit, though, the thought that other beings, perhaps human or not, are using their powers and creatures for who knows what, that scares me a bit, dear listeners. As always, until the next, let's cross that veil together.